Does God care about football? Good day, gentlemen, and thanks again for checking out the Brotherhood YouTube channel. The Brotherhood is the men's ministry of Sulphur Springs Baptist Church located in Warrenton, North Carolina. We meet on the last Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. And so if you happen to be in the area, by all means join us. We'd love to have you. We always have food, fellowship, and fun, all done in the name of Jesus Christ. Now, football is wrapped up, and the Philadelphia Eagles were able to win the first Super Bowl championship ever in their franchise history. And needless to say, the city of brotherly love was ecstatic. Now, I don't want to go into the details of everything about a small controversy that came up, but there was one particular sports commentator who made an opinion about a particular quarterback. And basically, what he was doing was he was applauding the young quarterback on both his skill and his Christian faith, and that this quarterback was aspiring to be a pastor. I believe that he wants to become a pastor one of these days. Now, surprisingly, this caused some controversy and even had some claiming things like, well, you're not supposed to be sharing your religious views when you're doing commentary on sports. And then it even led up to some people saying, well, God doesn't even care about football, so leave religion out of the subject of sports altogether. But is this true? Does God care about football? Does God care nothing about football, or for that matter, any extracurricular activity? Now today, I want to briefly tackle that question. I think it could be a little fun. And I also think that this could be a good exercise when talking about the subject of providence. Now, I don't want to get too technical. I don't want to get too theologically deep to the point that people are just glossing over and they're bored. But I do want to talk about God's providence. Now, what is that exactly? When Christians use the word providence, what do they mean? Well, for the sake of simplicity, I define providence as the manner in which God governs, oversees, and cares for all of his creation. I'm sure more could be said, but I'm again trying not to be overly heady. So the planets move in accordance to God's providential care. God is sovereign over the universe, and when he says this must do this, it must do that. Events occur in your life, not because of luck, but under the care of God. See, for the Christian, there is no chance. There is no absolute accidents. Now, they might seem like accidents to us, but mysteriously, in ways I'm not even going to comment yet, because that might be a future episode, but God is ruling the world and directing human history as he sees fit, and even those things that are hard to understand still are according to God's plan. So God has providential care over his creation. He didn't just create the world, wind it up like a clock, and then throw it away and let it run by itself, never to engage in it again. But no, Christians believe in a God who is actively involved in his world. But what does this have to do with football? Well, if God cares for every aspect of his creation, and he does, then in some sense, he cares about football. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that God has a favorite team, a favorite player, or even a favorite sport. But he is actively involved in all the goings-on in the world, even our extracurricular activities. I think a common mistake that even Christians tend to create is that they create a rigid divide, a strict divide between the sacred and mundane. They say things like, well, God is concerned about prayer, church, Bible reading, and love. Those things are sacred. But he isn't going to bother with things like what I'm going to eat, or what I'm going to drink, or football. That's mundane. Well, I would argue that Christians should see the totality of life as sacred, that we shouldn't compartmentalize some things in the category of things that God does care about, and then create another category in which we compartmentalize things that he doesn't care about. Do you see what I'm saying? Everything we do is to be an act of worship. Everything we do should be seen as our sacred duty and our involvement. So 1 Corinthians 10:31, Paul concludes a lengthy debate about food by saying whatever we eat, drink, or whatever we do, we should do to the glory of God. So if things as mundane as eating or drinking can be done to the glory of God and are important to God, then I would argue then things as mundane as football or basketball could also be done to the glory of God. Yes, we can play these sports to God's glory, and yes, we can enjoy these sports to God's glory. Now, there's also an interesting account in the Old Testament that I would like to turn our attention to. And this is found in 2 Kings chapter 6, and it's dealing with the prophet Elisha. In this account, we have an individual who is using a borrowed axe, and during one of his backswings, the axe head falls off or flings off, whatever. And it doesn't land safely on the ground, but unfortunately falls into a local body of water, and as you would suspect, it sinks like a rock to the bottom. And he was very upset about this. This gentleman was distraught. He was upset because it was a borrowed axe. It belonged to someone else. And he wanted to make sure that the axe head got to its rightful owner. And so he appealed to Elisha to help him out in some way. Now, I guess one could sit there and say, well, God doesn't care about an axe head. That's very trivial. He's not going to bother himself about whether or not this thing is going to be returned to its rightful owner. But that's not what happens in the story. In fact, God blesses Elisha with the ability to cause the axe head to float to the surface of the water. So it would seem that if God at one point in human history bothered himself or troubled himself, for lack of a better word, to cause this axe head to float just so it can go back to its rightful owner. If he's concerned with something seemingly as insignificant and trivial as that, then I would argue, I think that God is concerned about football or is interested in football. Okay? I'm not trying to make that this is how God always operates in human history, that he's going to do miracles for these trivial things from day-to-day life, but I'm just saying it's not beneath him, or it's not entirely unprecedented. He has done stuff like that before. So why would God be concerned with it? Well, let me do a little quick illustration to maybe help illustrate as to why I think God does enjoy these things that we're talking about. All right, let me share the illustration and you'll get my point. My son, Benjamin, loves video games. I, on the other hand, do not. I did when I was a child, but games over the years, I think have gotten so complicated, so challenging, I can't even keep up with him. If the game requires more than just simply running to the right to the end of the level, I won't get it and I won't enjoy it. And so I don't enjoy video games, whereas my son does. However, I do enjoy listening to my son talk about video games. I'll also routinely sit down and watch him enjoy the video game. And also, I enjoy buying him video games because he in return enjoys them and I enjoy him enjoying them. Does that make sense? So although video games are not something that's very interesting to me, and I probably won't play them too often or be involved with them too often, I'm certainly not going to keep up with all the updates and all the brand new games, but it is something I like to talk to my son about. I enjoy listening to the things that my son enjoys. So I think that is similar to how God interacts with our prayers over things that are seemingly trivial, insignificant, and mundane. That while God may not be super duper enthused about the Philadelphia Eagles winning, who's to say, but I do think he enjoys watching his creatures enjoy his creation. That I think he enjoys watching them compete. I think he enjoys watching them have a good time with one another. These things are gifts from God. The ability to exercise, to compete, to have fun, and have games. I think these things he enjoys. I think he enjoys watching his creatures enjoy the gifts he has given them. I don't think that's a stretch to say. So we are delighting ourselves in the gifts of God, and therefore he's enjoying it. So anyway, that's kind of my little take on it. Take it for whatever it's worth. I could be wrong. Maybe God does have a favorite team. Maybe God has some huge cosmic reason as to why the Philadelphia Eagles won and the New England Patriots did not. I don't know. Maybe he does. I'm not in a position to know everything that God is up to in the world. But I do want to say a word of warning to a lot of my sports fans, okay? A lot of times I see how fanatical sports fans can get, hence the word fan, that they will have no problem driving miles, paying bukus of money to go to these games. They'll spend lots of money on snacks, tickets, parking, paraphernalia, I mean, all sorts of stuff. And then they'll paint themselves in some tribal colors. They'll hug strangers at these games, high-five them. They'll hoop and holler, sometimes even take off their shirts. I mean, they just go nuts. In fact, we even saw that there was a little bit of an overreaction to the success of the Philadelphia Eagles, and that we saw people overturning cars in Philadelphia, going nuts. But what I say all this is that a lot of people take sports very seriously. A lot of men take sports very seriously, and they get very open about it. And I'm telling you, they're very committed. That I've even heard of some football stadiums that get so cold that their toilet bowl water freezes, and yet that doesn't deter men from attending these functions, getting dressed up, going nuts, hugging strangers, falling down on their knees, praying to God that the field goal attempt will be good. And yet, when it comes to church, they're very standoffish. They don't want to talk to anybody. If someone were to pray or call on them to pray out loud, they would freak out, claiming that they're a private person, that they don't know how to really express. Yeah, I mean, you get the point that I'm saying. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with enjoying football. There's nothing wrong with investing time, money, or energy in it. So if your listener is believing that Seth Miller is anti-football, well, that's not the case. I'm saying enjoy all these things. They're wonderful, and enjoy them to the glory of God. However, keep things in perspective, right? If you're super involved in sports, so involved that you're like that which I just described, but very standoffish and aloof in your local church, or you're very standoffish and aloof, spiritually speaking, in regards to your family, meaning you don't like to pray with your family or read scripture with your family, then I would say you have your priorities out of whack. To make sure that you don't allow football to somehow, at least in your life, in your perspective, supersede God, and that you forget about doing the kingdom work or having a little bit of boldness and being forward in your work for the glory of God and His kingdom. Okay? Well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up before I put my foot in my mouth and have a lot of people thinking that I'm anti-football and have a lot of angry fans commenting on this. Please do not misunderstand me. So I'm going to wrap it up. That does indeed include another episode of The Brotherhood. I am your host, Seth Miller. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and enjoy. And as always, may God's men point other men to the God-man, Jesus Christ.